Yeah, it's up. Scott, when it comes to NATO, I think the crucial point about NATO is that NATO is not a defensive force, is an offensive force. This is the problem with the strategy of these endless wars that NATO is pursuing. This is the problem when it comes to Russia and right at the border of Russia. You come in close, so close to Russia, at doorstep of Russia. How you can imagine Russia would not react to you? And on the other hand, I don't see if the United States decides to keep NATO as a defensive force, nobody would have any sort of problem with NATO. Nobody would attack Germany. What is in it? What's in it for Russia to attack Germany? What do they want from Germany? Russia wants a better relationship with economic ties with Germany. They don't want war with Germany. This is what Russia is fighting for, in my opinion.
Look, now we get into sort of a sensitive topic, but Russia has a demographic problem. You see Russia passing laws right now to encourage childbirth amongst the Russian people because they have a declining population. And because of the conflict in Ukraine and because of the expansion of NATO, Russia's had to increase the size of its military. Now it's up to 1.3. It's probably going to get up closer to 1.6 by the time the expansion is done. 1.6 million under arms. And this takes people out of the workforce. So you see Russia now, talking about, hey, can we bring in Indians? Can we bring in, outsiders into our workforce? The Russians would love nothing more than to have NATO just say, we're a defensive organization again. We're back to our roots, and we will, behave accordingly. I think you'd see Russia start dropping the size of its military quickly, because then it can take that manpower and put it back into the workforce. The workforce then that will be well paid. What happens when you have a well-paid workforce? They get married. Give a guy some money, he finds himself a pretty girl, and next thing you know, he has a house and some kids. And that's what the Russians need. They have these great family values, but it's hard to raise a family if you're in the military. That's not the best place in the world to raise a family. Maybe as an officer, a senior officer, but if you're an enlisted man, if you're out there in the ranks, no, it's disruptive as hell. And the Russians are moving away from a conscript system to a contract system. So we're talking about long-term, contracts. We call them enlistments here in the United States. But again, you're going to be in the business of preparing for war, training for war. You're not home raising a family. You're not producing anything. So anybody who sits there and says, no, the Russians want to really build up their military and really do it, they don't understand Russia. It's not what Russia wants at all. It's the exact opposite of Russia wants. Russia will do what Russia needs to do to protect itself. There's no doubt about that. But the Russians would prefer that rather than expanding their military by 600,000, to have those 600,000 in the workforce and have that workforce gainfully employed, making things that are good for Russia and good for Russia's economic partners, earning a good solid income, paying taxes, and then getting married and raising kids. Lots of kids, because the Russia needs kids. This whole war thing, this whole war footing, it's not good for the health of a nation, the economic health, but also the demographic health. Europe's going to have seen that problem. You see declining birth rates everywhere. This is sort of the danger of immigration, because now you're injecting non-traditional values into societies that are defined by traditional values. It dilutes the unique character of nations. Russia has spent 25 years rebuilding what it means to be a Russian. There was a time when Russians were ready to abandon Russia. They were abandoning Russia. They didn't believe in Russia. They had lost faith in Russia. Not today. I have to say, I'm deeply impressed with the Russians. They're not a perfect society. Nothing is. Nothing's perfect. But they're pretty damn good. These are people that are, by and large, happy with who they are, happy where they are. Could things be better? Sure. Are they working to make it better? Yeah. But, the Russians like being Russian. They're proud of being Russia, and they have a lot to be proud of. I think Russia would like the Europeans to be proud of being who they are too. The Russians don't, hold it against me for being proud American. I mean, some scratch their head and say, well, what are you proud of? And I say, well, the potential. I think America has more potential than any place in the world because we're not trapped by our history. We live in a prison of ideas. And if we could just live up to those ideas and those ideals, we could be pretty damn cool. But we're not doing that. So yeah, we're working. But I love the potential of America. And the Russians are like, cool. Love a guy who loves his country. The Russians love a person who loves their country. They will never hold it against you for saying, I'm a proud American, or I'm a proud Iranian, or I'm a proud Brazilian, or I'm a proud Canadian. They're like, good. You're proud of your country. So are we. And therefore, we have a lot in common. You love your country. I love my country. Let's get along. The Russians are great about this. Europe, not so much anymore. And it's sad. It's sad. I lived in Europe. I grew up in Europe. I grew up in Germany. And I traveled extensively. Back in the 80s, I got the Eurail pass, and you throw a backpack on the back and you just go. And for 2 months, I just basically caught trains and camped out and saw all of Europe. And you could drive places, my parents, every time they took a vacation, we'd go to a different place in Europe. It's just fantastic. I loved Europe. I loved every aspect of Europe. I loved crossing the border. I loved going from Germany, where I had my German marks, and I had to go into Italy and get the Italian lira. And then, one of the first things you do when you get to the train station is you go in and you exchange your money and you get the other money. And now you're like in Italy. And I really know I'm in Italy because I have lira. Not today. It's all euro. And they've sort of erased the borders. And I know it's supposed to be convenient, but Europe's lost its allure, lost what it means to be European. Anyways, I babbled on too far about that.
Do you feel that, let's put it this way, can the former Austro-Hungarian states, together with Serbia, realistically form a counter coalition to resist NATO's forever war strategy? Is that possible? If
Europe was healthy and NATO was healthy, it would be almost impossible for that to happen. But when we start talking about collapse, and we are going to see collapse, anything's possible. And what will happen is that Europe will break up into different factions. And you just identified one, which is the former Austro-Hungarian Empire. It's amazing how people forget their history. And thank you very much for bringing this up. Thank you for bringing this up, because for instance, in Turkey, people are all talking about Turkey, and I'm like, you guys do know that it was just a little bit more than 100 years ago that there was a caliphate in Turkey, the Sultan. The Ottoman Empire was there. When we talk about Syria, we're literally saying 100 years ago it was the Ottoman Empire. Turkey, Iraq, the whole thing. And people are just like, nah, 100 years isn't that long ago. I mean, we're talking about, 1925. If I talk about American history, oh yeah, the flappers, the Roaring Twenties. My grandparents were alive in the Roaring Twenties. Okay, so you realize there's direct connectivity, but somehow when we apply it to the other part of the world, it's like, no. Why you mentioned Austro-Hungarian Empire? Because it existed. It was real, and we're talking about people's grandparents or great grandparents. People are alive today who know people who were alive during the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There's a direct connectivity of historical transfer of emotions and knowledge and information, and so it's not gone. And so when people are when they look at the failure of the European state today, and people are going to be looking for alternatives, you can be damn sure that there will be people who say, hey, the core of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, we should come back together and work with one another to be allies. Yeah, you can definitely see that, and that's what we sort of see with Serbia, Hungary, and Slovakia. That's sort of that's like a core the Slavic core of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Not total Slav. The Hungarians aren't Slavs, but it's a core that they have common values, common history, and they definitely have opponents in Europe, the Croatians, the Kosovars, the Albanians, and who knows? Maybe Austria will join their ranks. You never know. Once Europe starts to fall apart, anything's possible. Sky's the limit.
Scott, do you feel that the Trump administration somehow is trying to normalize the extreme violence and genocide in Gaza?
I don't know if they're trying to normalize it. I think they're ignoring it because they know it exists. They've facilitated this. Look, Donald Trump. I gotta when I'm wrong, I'm wrong. When I'm wrong, I'm wrong. When Donald Trump came out and said, depopulation of Gaza and all, I talked with you about it. I said, he can't really mean that. This has to be a ploy. And then, of course, when there was a counter offer on there, I went, see, he put an offer. He didn't really want it to happen. There's a counter offer out there. Turns out he wanted it to happen. This is Donald Trump's policy, what's happening today. The slaughter of the people of Gaza, the genocide. And we have to use that word. People don't like to use that word. They get insulted. No, use the word because it literally fits the definition. Look it up. Article 2 of the Geneva Conventions defines what genocide is. I forget what the American law is, section 1081 or 1089 of 18 U.S. Code. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But we define it. We know what genocide is. Hell, we could just use our own precedent, because the United States, they go, well, it doesn't meet the category of genocide. What were the standards for the ISIS genocide against the Yazidi? The exact same standards that exist today in Gaza, except Gaza's by an order of magnitude greater. The inconsistency of America is crazy. But inconsistency is one thing. Criminality is another thing. We are literally war criminals here. When the whole world is debating the issue of genocide and stuff, international lawyers were and other concerned people were quick to say genocide's bad, but there's worse things than genocide. War crimes and massive human rights violations can operate on a scope and scale that far exceed the harm being done by genocide. Genocide has specific legal terms that have to be met to get that term there. But there's bad things that can happen too. And however you cut Gaza, it's a war crime. It's a massive human rights violation. And I believe it readily fits the definition of genocide as put forward by both the Geneva Conventions and U.S. law. And by U.S. precedent, the standard we ourselves have set for defining genocide is easily surpassed in Gaza. So, gosh, here we are. On the one hand, I'm trying to say I'd like to create a civilian engagement team to work with Donald Trump to promote good relations between the United States and Russia. And I do. But on the other hand, I have to recognize that Donald Trump is one of the greatest war criminals the world has ever seen, because he not only is facilitating Israeli war crimes, he's an architect of these war crimes. They are implementing his plan, his strategy. He's guilty. If there were ever a Gazan Nuremberg trial equivalent and there was a court of jurisdiction and Donald Trump could be brought before it, he'd be found guilty and hung by the neck until dead. And so would a whole bunch of other Americans, because what we're doing is unforgivable. And for the American people, I've sat there and you've heard me say it: scratch a German, get a Nazi. I don't forgive the Germans for what they did in World War II, and I never will. I'm just that way. I can live in peace with them as long as they recognize who they are and what they were, and make sure that they guard against ever going back down that path, which they're not doing right now. But my God, what are we? We, the people of the United States of America. We have embraced Zionism. And Zionism is the modern day equivalent of Nazi ideology. It's literally about imposing genocidal policies on a people, the eradication of the people of Gaza, the Palestinians, of the Palestinian state, this targeted eradication, the wholesale slaughter. I mean, what's going on in Gaza City right now is the equivalent of what the Nazis did to the Warsaw Ghetto, and yet nobody wants to acknowledge those parallels. Oh, how dare you? Blood libel. No. I'm actually being nice. If I say, oh, all you've done is the Warsaw Ghetto, I'm being nice, because what you're doing is worse than the Warsaw Ghetto. And the American people are complicit in this. And every American has to look in the mirror and say, I am a war criminal. I am the equivalent of the good German. I'm the person that sat by and let this happen. I'm the person that walked the streets and had the ash come on my shoulder and I brushed it away and pretended it didn't happen. I knew what was going on down the road there, but I just closed my eyes to it. My neighbors who, used to do this, that, and the other thing disappeared. And then I watched people come in and steal their property, and I said nothing. We're standing by while the United States is facilitating the mass murder of Palestinians. Truth is now a death sentence. Journalists telling the truth in Gaza now are being killed because the last thing Israel wants is the truth to be told. You have Benjamin Netanyahu coming out just admitting that they're losing the narrative. Therefore, Israel must find a better way to alter the algorithms and to do this. No, and to kill journalists. Any journalist that there stands up and says, you are committing genocide, gets killed. If I went to Gaza, they would kill me in a heartbeat, instantly. Anybody who goes to Gaza it's a death sentence. So that's where we are right now. I mean, we can't sugarcoat it. We can't pretend it's not there. How do we chew gum and walk at the same time? And what I mean by that is, I struggle with this every day because people hit me all the time. They say, Scott, why aren't you focused more on Gaza? So I'm trying to stop a nuclear war between the United States and Russia. I'd like to think that that's sort of like a big deal. And that's where my skill set is, about 70 to 80% of my skill set is there. Yeah, I got a lot of experience in the Middle East, a whole bunch of experience in the Middle East. And I've got a lot of experience in Israel. I'm learning about Palestine. It never was my cause, but my God, it's become my cause today. But when I look at what I can bring to the table, I'm more efficient dealing with the Russia question than I am the Gaza question. But man, it's hard. Because it's just there. Mass murder done in my name, my taxpayer dollars. And then I sort of feel guilty because I'm so focused on trying to prevent a nuclear war with Russia that I don't spend the time that I should on what's going on in Gaza. And I have to admit, I'm tired of looking at the pictures. It breaks my heart to see, these dead children, these dead mothers, these dead civilians, people just trying to live, starving to death, mass starvation. What the? How can that happen today? Today, in this day of mass information, where it's there right in front of your eyes. It's not like you're reading a newspaper about the starvation of the Indians in World War II, reading a story that's 3 months old. No, it's happening right now. And what are we doing? Ah, man, I'm going to go crazy. This is the kind of stuff that just drains your soul. But we got to soldier on. That's the whole thing. You can't win every battle. You got to win the ones you got to fight the ones you can win. And right now I'm dedicated to the Russia thing, and I'm not getting off the Russia thing, but it breaks my heart. It drains my soul because every morning there they are, dead children, dead parents, dead civilians, and the Israelis just gloating over them. And we're backing the Israelis, and we somehow pretend that this is normal. We pretend that Israel is a normal functioning state. It's not. It's a cancer to the world. It's a cancer to the soul of humanity. I'm not advocating the annihilation of the Jewish race. No, this has nothing to do with religion, although increasingly it does, because what's happening is the Israelis are using, religious themes. Amalek. Have we forgotten this? The repeated invocation of Amalek, the creation of a subhuman, identity for the Palestinian people that justifies their annihilation in the name of the Jewish faith. We can't forget this. Do we know that there's battalions of Talmudic scholars specifically recruited into units who are going in there and carrying out these horrific crimes? They believe that they're permitted by God to rape Palestinians to death, and they do so. They have no qualms about killing women and children because they believe God wills it. I mean, there is a religious aspect to this, and this is where I condemn American Jewry. I'm sick and tired of walking down my street saying we stand with Israel. That means you stand for genocide. You stand for mass murder. We stand for Israel means we support murder. That's it. You can't support Israel. You can't stand with Israel and not realize that you're supporting murder. In the American Jewish community, they deserve all to go to hell. Now, I know there's a handful of them out there doing this, that, and the other thing. Maybe more than a handful. I'll give them credit. But collectively, the big Jewish organizations, if you stand with Israel, you stand with the devil. That's just, there's no other way to put it about it. You're on the side of Satan. Don't tell me you're on the side of good. Don't tell me you're God's chosen people. You are literally doing the devil's work, because that's what genocide is. And I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for this, and I don't want to get your channel banned on YouTube for my emotional outburst. So sorry about that.
I think the last targets when you go and fight something like the way that Israel is killing people is attacking hospitals and journalists, because this is the last thing that you would attack. These people, they don't do anything to you, fighting you, and they don't do anything. They're literally doing nothing but helping the people who are damaged, who are suffering, and the lives that here is what is Israel has attacked a hospital in Gaza, and then the journalists went there to see what has happened, and they attack again and kill the journalists. And here is what the Israeli government spokesman said. Scott, his British accent is somehow amazing to hear that, and the way that he's trying to say his point of view. And here is what we've seen in the media. At the same time, they're trying to say that we condemn what's going on in Gaza. I think the British, I think what's going on with the British government, the mindset, their strategy, the sort of manipulation in the Middle East is unbelievable. Any case, I'm not ignoring the case of Ukraine. I put the case of Ukraine in the same scenario. It's all about the British and the way that they're thinking of these things that are happening.
Yeah, look, it's the British trying to hold on to relevance. It's the British stepping into a leadership vacuum by the United States. You know, we used to be able to control the British because we worked very closely with them and we subordinated them to our will. But now that we've created opportunities for gaps to appear in the relationship, the British have stepped up to that. There is no moral look, as bad as the United States is, and we're pretty damn bad, there are, believe it or not, moral barriers. There's things that, we say, no, enough's enough. For the British, there's no such thing as enough is enough. The British are the worst nation in the world when it comes to this sort of thing. They truly can embrace policies that cause the deaths of hundreds of thousands of millions, and they won't even blink an eye. That's just who they are. Their intelligence services have no soul at all. The CIA has done horrible things. I'm not going to pretend they haven't, but I will say at the end of the day, there's a reason why CIA officers all end up alcoholics, because at the end of the day, they know what they've done is evil, and they're ashamed of what they've done. The British, there's no shame there. They all go out and get their knighthood, and they sit there and they retire, and they have their little posh parties, and they all chuckle and chortle and laugh over the stuff they've done, the crimes they've done in the name of, Her Majesty or His Majesty the King. So no, the British, they're out there playing games of empire right now. That's what they're doing. They're trying to manipulate behind the scenes. They're everywhere. Everywhere you find death and destruction, you find a British hand.
Before wrapping up this session, I want to play a clip in which it's a tragedy, in my opinion, but here is what's going on in the mind of the President of the United States. It seems somehow we are living in different time and universe.
I mean, it's shameful, first of all, for a president that is supposed to be make America great again, to be pursuing this narcissistic, egotistical goal of having some award issued by a Norwegian, group of elitists, award that has lost its meaning, become so politicized down the road. I mean, they gave it to Barack Obama for doing nothing. And they sit back and they don't look at the people who actually promote peace. They just hand it out for political reasons.
Actually, it wasn't for nothing. It was for bombing Yemen. Or bombing Libya. Sorry.
Well, yeah. Well, actually, they gave it to him before he bombed Libya, though.
Not before.
Yeah. He should have turned it in after he bombed Libya. He should have said, "I haven't lived up to the values that are put in here." But at least he got it for the potential. Trump. What war has he stopped? What war has he stopped? India, Pakistan, he didn't stop that. They stopped it. Cambodia, Thailand, still some tension there. He didn't stop it. They say he just sticks his nose into everything. Says, there, I touched it, I stopped it. Armenia and Azerbaijan, man, that could actually, the Zangezur corridor could actually turn into a major war because of his meddling. He didn't solve any problems there. He's not. Here I am. See, I'm trying to get a meeting with this guy, and I want to, say, hey, I'm here to help you on Russia. So I have to. It's time I start behaving a little bit more politically and diplomatically. But he's not smart enough to know any of the nuances of these details. The reason why we're trying to engage with him on Russia is that he's advised by complete imbeciles. I mean, with all due respect to Steve Witkoff, he doesn't know a damn thing about Russia. He has good relationships with Kirill Dmitriev, but it's a relationship that's only brought about by the fact that Trump, has sent him and Vladimir Putin has empowered Kirill, so they have this relationship. But you just listen to Witkoff; he doesn't know anything about what he's talking about. Nothing. Keith Kellogg is 100% a Ukrainian shill. Hell, they just gave him a medal for being such a good Ukrainian shill. That's all right, Keith. Good job. But at least admit what you are. Don't pretend to be some sort of unbiased envoy looking for peace. You're solidly on the side of Ukraine. That's why you got a medal. Marco Rubio is just a warmongering hawk who hates Russia. Just go back and he's never said a nice thing about Russia in his entire life. Hates them, hates communists, hates the Russians, the whole works. Pete Hegseth isn't smart enough to, lead a box of bricks, let alone the Department of Defense, apparently the Department of War soon to be. These are the people that advise Scott Bessent. We've already talked about this, the imbecilical approach he has towards this Russia issue. There's no peace coming out of any of these policies with Russia. This is why we're trying to put together this civilian engagement team. I may be excluded because if I were Donald Trump, I wouldn't let me anywhere near the White House after what I've said. But I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize. It's the truth, and it has to be said. But he's supposed to be America first. Why is it that he puts so much credence into this bauble from a Norwegian group of elitists? It tells you he's not America first. He's Donald Trump first. This is make Trump great. That's it. That's the movement. And no, that's not good for America. If he really wanted peace, he could solve the Russia problem today. Just pick up the phone and tell Zelensky it's over. Call up the Europeans and say, nope, we're done. We're not playing stupid games anymore. But he won't. Instead, he'll facilitate the continuation of this conflict with the promise of American weapons. This thing will go on for more months. Look, we're talking 90 to 100,000 dead Ukrainians a month. Okay, we got September, October, November, December. That's 4. I'm telling you right now, that's 400,000 dead Ukrainians by the end of the year, in addition to what's going on. That's in addition to 625. That's more than 1 million dead Ukrainians this year. If the conflict goes over into next year, the death rate's going to go up even higher. So you're going to talk by June, if this war goes on for another year, another 1.5 million. So 2 million more dead Ukrainians. That's what Donald Trump's giving. You want to give him the Nobel Prize for that? Are you crazy? And then we get into Gaza. What he's done in Gaza alone is disqualified, finished. It's like giving Adolf Hitler a Nobel Prize because he evacuated troops from some corner of the world. No, but you committed the Holocaust. You invaded the Soviet Union. You allowed the Commissar order. You carried out mass crimes. We can't forget that. Donald Trump is the total package, and right now the total package is indelibly corrupted by what's going on in Israel. There's no forgiving this, and there's no redeeming this. Yes, we can try and prevent a nuclear war with Russia, and we must. But that doesn't absolve Donald Trump of the crimes that he's committed with Israel at all. And the fact that he doesn't see that, and the fact that he thinks this is a selling point, just shows two things. One, that he truly is a narcissist blinded by his own egomania, and he's an irrational player at this point in time. And two, the American people are truly the dumbest people on the planet because we're buying into this, because we're nodding our heads and saying, oh, yeah. I mean, his base, come on, guys, do better. Really. You say you believe in American values, but yeah, I mean, now we're going to get, now we're going down a different path. But, flag burning. I love the flag. I got one above me. That flag flew in Vodkinsk. That's why I have it there. That's the flag that flew over the Vodkinsk headquarters while I was in Vodkinsk. And I love it. I love the American flag. Former Marine officer, officer of the day. I had to read the flag manual, know the laws, know how to treat the flag, how to handle the flag, how to raise the flag, how to lower the flag, how to fold the flag, all the things. It's the living emblem of our country. The living emblem of our country. I didn't say that. That's the flag law. And yet, I will defend somebody's right to burn this living symbol of America because the Supreme Court has deemed that to be constitutionally protected free speech. And I love my country so much that I'll stand by with tears in my eyes as you burn my flag and say, you have a right to do that. I disagree with you. I resent you, but you have a right to do that. But no, not in Donald Trump's America. We have a Third Amendment that prohibits the quartering of soldiers in people's homes, which means that it's reflective of the notion that we don't want to live in a militarized society. Yet Donald Trump now is sending troops into the major cities of America to fight crime. But as Benjamin Franklin said, if you're willing to sacrifice liberty for security, then you deserve neither. And that's where we are today. And the cities he's sending them to aren't necessarily, you have to be suspicious because they're also the heart of the political opposition. So he's literally sending American troops to occupy cities where the greatest opposition to Donald Trump exists. We live in a dictatorship. I mean, the constitutional republic's on the verge of being destroyed by this man who claims to be all about making America great again. But the only thing that makes America great is the Constitution. We are a constitutional republic, not a Trump dictatorship. Yet this is the direction we're headed down. I may get the FBI to visit me again because of this, but so be it. There are things we're dying for. And one of those is the Constitution of the United States of America and what it means to be an American. And today, sadly, the American people are adrift. My wife, when she came here, had to take a test to become an American citizen, a test on civics, on the Constitution. And the passing grade is 100%. You're not allowed to get anything wrong. I will tell you right now, if every American citizen took that test today, natural-born American, I dare say over 95% would fail. We don't know what it means to be an American. We've lost touch with who we are, what we are. And this is why we get these policies that we have. Because real Americans would never support what's going on in Israel. Real Americans who believe in human rights, who believe in the dignity of mankind. All men are created equal. You ever thought about that? So anyways, that's where we are. Sorry about it, man.
Yeah.
Tough
Yeah,
topics.
it was amazing. Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always, talking to you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Have a